If you read last week's field report, you'll know that last Wednesday was a gorgeous day. Sun, mild temperatures, and thermals galore. But you'll also remember that I had some problems flying that day. Doing a low-level turn over the field, I lost orientation, applied incorrect rudder, and recovered just in time to cushion the landing. Somewhat. The low wing suffered some damage at the polyhedral joint. Not enough to stop me from flying, but the joint felt a little mushy. Later on, I misjudged my approach across the parking lot and flew right into a tree. After we retrieved the plane, the wing joint definitely felt mushy. When I slid the outer panel off, one of the wing joiner rods could wiggle all over in its socket. I figured that I had broken a rib or two and resigned myself to some repair work. Surprisingly, when I opened up the wing, I found that all the ribs were intact. What had failed was one of the aluminum tubes into which the wing joiners slid. Why did that fail, and why there, when it should have had a carbon fiber wing joiner going through it during the flight? Let's go back to the RC Group's build thread that I followed when assembling the Yellow Jacket. It made absolutely no mention of plugging the ends of the tubes. That meant that, if I wasn't careful with assembly before a flight, a wing joiner could slip right past the end of the tube, right up to the next rib. Well, I thought of that, so I used balsa plugs that I CA'd in place. Problem solved, or so I thought. But over time, the CA joint failed on a number of tubes, and that led to the case where, when I assembled the wing panels, the joiners could end up going only partway through the tubes. For the forward joiners, this wouldn't matter as much, as the ribs are spaced closely enough that the joiner has a reasonable chance of going through at least 2 ribs. But for the aft joiners, the ribs are spaced twice as far apart. And, what happened in my case, the end of a joiner ended up about halfway between 2 widely spaced ribs. So when the wingtip touched the ground on my hard landing, that caused a stress fracture of the aluminum tube right at the end of the joiner. Both sections of the fractured tube also came loose from the ribs. So, what to do? I wanted to both repair and reinforce. The kit had no leftover tubing, and I didn't want to bother Corky, so I focused on reinforcement. And the obvious way to do that was to extend that one short rib to provide more support for the tube. On the side with the broken tube, I slid the broken ends into the fabricated rib extension and applied the usual CA. The other side was structurally sound, so I had to make a sandwich of the rib extension layers, splitting them in different directions in successive layers. To top it off, I crimped the ends of the tubes so the wing joiners could no longer slip farther inside the wing. The same problem exists on the outer panels, which I didn't have time to uncover and recover before the next Wednesday fun fly. But as long as I insert the wing joiners into the center section first, I'm very unlikely to have a problem.